I'm Rosemary Shields, co-chair of the Voter Service Committee of the Cape Cod area of the League of Women Voters, and with my comrade in arms, Henrietta Cosentino of the Plymouth League of Women Voters, we'd like to welcome you to our webinar on nuclear safety, keeping Massachusetts safe from nuclear accidents. We have lots of information to share, but first, a few reminders. We'll be recording this session for future reference. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat so after the presentations we can answer them. Tomorrow morning, we'll be sending you a toolkit with everything you need to follow up on the information that we are giving you. So I'm going to start by just saying what an avid fan I am of the League of Women Voters Massachusetts Legislative Action Committee and my own local legislative committee. They do a great top-notch job keeping us informed on the important issues in Massachusetts. And it was through my local legislative committee and the Cape Cod downwinders that I discovered that I had retired 35 miles downwind from the Plymouth Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station. And here I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to start. Okay. So can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I am trying to quote. So let me just put this down. Here I am. So from 1976 to 1981, I worked with the League of Women Voters of Nashville in the Tennessee Valley Authority to discover if the TVA needed the 11 nuclear power plants they were planning. The first time I went to a citizen comment session that the TVA was holding, there was a woman named Virginia Albrecht who was the smartest person in the room. And I asked the person next to me who she was, and he nonchalantly said, "Oh, her? She's with the League of Women Voters." I joined the League the next day. With lots of work and with a wise board of the TVA directors who were appointed by Jimmy Carter, those plants that were on the drawing board were never completed. So why are we here today? If you measure a 50-mile radius around every US nuclear power plant, those 50-mile radii would cover 1 in 3 people in the United States. That's 116 million nuclear neighbors. At least 4 million Massachusetts residents are within a 50-mile radius of the Plymouth Pilgrim Nuclear Site, the Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Plant, and the Seabrook Nuclear Power Plant. So many of us are nuclear neighbors. So why is this a concern? Because the federal government has failed to find and to cite a permanent nuclear waste repository, all high-level nuclear waste is stored at the nuclear sites. According to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, spent fuel is thermally hot, highly radioactive, and potentially harmful. Since the only way radioactive waste finally becomes harmless is through decay, which for high-level radioactive wastes takes hundreds of thousands of years, the wastes must be stored and finally disposed of in a way that provides adequate protection to the public for a very long time. Currently, if a radiological emergency occurs, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission asks that anyone living within 10 miles of a plant tune in to their local radio or television emergency alert system and heed the instructions from state and local officials. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission also suggests that anyone within 50 miles take action to protect local food and water supplies. Recently, it has been argued that the evacuation zone should be extended to 50 miles as well. During the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan, authorities from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission recommended that Americans living within 50 miles of the plant to evacuate. So the next big question is, are the state and local officials prepared? On the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency website, it asks, what is a nuclear power plant emergency? An emergency situation at a nuclear power plant could result in a release of dangerous levels of radiation. This release could affect health and safety of persons near the nuclear power plant. In the next paragraph, it states, following the guidance from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the 10-mile emergency planning zone around the plant that existed while Pilgrim was operational has been eliminated. And why is that? Because Holtec International and its subsidiaries, who now own Pilgrim, in their pursuit to cut costs, have applied for many safety exemptions from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and has been granted virtually all of them. The Massachusetts Management Agency continues, the plans and procedures about an emergency incident at Pilgrim that were previously outlined and disseminated to residents in annual calendars are no longer in effect. Residents who have questions about local community emergency plans should contact their local emergency management director for more information. I contacted my local emergency management director and found out from our fire chief that all procedures have been relegated to the state. So I have gone completely round robin. The Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency has eliminated the emergency planning zone and the emergency guidance and tells you to contact your local emergency management director. My local emergency management director tells me to check with the state. If this lack of planning and coordination between federal, state, and local agencies is an indication of how well Massachusetts will work to protect citizen safety in the case of a major radiation release, it should make us pause to think and be concerned over our health and the health of our families. So what does all of this have to do with the League of Women Voters? 1 year after the 1979 Three Mile Island nuclear plant accident in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the League of Women Voters pushed for a congressional passage of the Low-Level Waste Policy Act in 1980 and the Nuclear Waste Policy Act in 1982. Over 40 years ago, the League wanted to ensure a national policy that incorporates adequate environmental safeguards with a strong role for public participation in nuclear waste repository siting decisions. Leagues across the country have used league positions to support their involvement in the siting of low-level nuclear waste sites, high-level waste sites, and nuclear power plants. The League's approach to nuclear issues is one of problem solving. The League's aim is to work constructively for the maximum protection of public health and safety and the environment and the citizen participation in that decision-making process at all levels of government. The Pilgrim nuclear site in Plymouth will become a high-level radioactive waste site since the federal government has failed to find and to site a permanent repository to adequately store away from reactor radioactive waste. The federal government has been researching this problem since 1942. At the end of the 1990s, the nuclear industry sued the Department of Energy for failing to find a permanent repository. So power plants and nuclear sites receive compensation for storing and safeguarding radioactive wastes on site. Reimbursements have already cost taxpayers $8 billion. The industry estimates total costs will reach $50 billion. The Energy Department also is sitting on a nuclear waste fund containing an additional $43 billion. The fund was created to pay for a permanent repository, but it could be repurposed to interim storage without legislative authorization, according to the Congressional Research Office. Meanwhile, 83,000 metric tons of high-level waste sits stranded beside America's nuclear power plants, which create 2,000 additional tons every year. In decommissioning the Pilgrim Nuclear Plant, there are two things at stake: public safety and the $1.2 billion decommissioning fund. The Pilgrim Nuclear Plant was sold by the Entergy Company to the Holtec Company for a nominal cash consideration. Was that $1? Was that $1,000? I have been unable to find the source of that exact sum. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission on August 22nd, 2019, approved the transfer from the Entergy Company to the Holtec Company. Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey twice contested this decision over concerns on Holtec's financial ability to decommission the site and the need for an environmental assessment of the site before decommissioning begins. By the Nuclear Regulatory Commission approving the transfer, the public was deprived of the opportunity to comment on the process. In June 2020, the Attorney General and Holtec reached an agreement. Holtec must maintain at least $193 million in funds until it completes most of the cleanup and site restoration work, and after that point, $38.4 million in funds until the spent nuclear fuel is removed from the plant. Massachusetts Departments of Environmental Protection and Public Health will oversee the cleanup, and the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, MEMA, will receive continued funding each year to perform its emergency preparedness functions until risks decrease. So I have a call out to Deputy Director Dawn Brantley to find out why their website has not been upgraded, to tell us what to do. So the Pilgrim site contains 2,800 highly radioactive fuel rods that are being transferred from a spent fuel pool to Holtec brand steel and concrete drums known as dry casks. At the end of June 2021, Holtec has loaded 29 high storm dry casks. 34 more casks are scheduled to be filled, and this work will be completed by this November. The Holtec steel and concrete drums, known as dry casks, have steel cores that are only 1/2 inch thick. I want to yell that out. They only have a 1/2 inch steel core. In comparison, dry casks in Germany, Switzerland, and Japan have 10 to 12 inch steel cores. On May 2019, Paul M. Blanche, nuclear engineer and energy consultant, did a review of Holtec's final safety analysis report. Mr. Blanche found that there are no relief valves to release pressure buildup in the casks, no meaningful accidental analysis or aging management program, no way to inspect the cask interiors, and no capability to monitor and repair the casks. Finally, there is a limited and undocumented lifetime for the casks. Holtec recently told the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that the casks have a warranty of 25 years. 25 years to store waste that will last hundreds of thousands of years. The big question, who is financially responsible when failure occurs? So right now, Massachusetts needs to look at the safety of the high-level radioactive waste that will be situated in Plymouth at the Pilgrim Nuclear site and at other sites that affect Massachusetts residents. I will now turn over the next portion of the program to Henrietta Cosentino, and I'll check and organize the questions that are in the chat. Thank you.
There. Hello, I am trying to get my screen shared and Zoom is doing something funny to me. So I have to get my tech support here to help me figure out what's happened to Zoom. I'm so sorry. Okay, the host has asked me to start my video, so here goes. Can you hear me? Can you see my video?
Yes, we can hear and see you.
Okay, great. And you can see my video?
Your face,
Can
yes, but if you're sharing something, no, we can't see that yet.
Okay, you can't see that I'm sharing. I don't know how to get the screen to share because I cannot get to Zoom. I'm so sorry. I'm on. Taylor, I need your help. I don't know what to do.
Yep, I was texting you, but I can do it verbally as well.
No, I'm not in my main Zoom. I'm not in any Zoom.
Yep. Okay, so press the escape key.
Okay. Yeah. I'm out of Zoom.
Are you back? Open the Zoom webinar window.
There. Okay, I got it. I'm there. So now I will share my screen.
Now you're going to want to go into presentation. Got it.
Is that there? Am I there now?
All set.
Okay, great. All right, I'm sorry. I'm Henrietta Cosentino, and let's get right to it. I live less than 5 miles as the crow flies to Pilgrim. So I'm in the belly of the beast, and this has aroused my survival instinct. And now I want to awaken your survival instinct. I want to scare you to action. We need to keep this beast in its box, and we cannot afford to ignore it. Unfortunately, it's all too easy to forget what's lurking out of sight. It is invisible. You can't see, smell, touch, or taste radiation. And yet, if we don't pay attention, who will? The fact is that nobody has our back. Our government will fail us until or unless we demand attention. It has failed us at every level so far. The feds have failed us. The state has failed us. And I can't emphasize this enough. Our power comes from numbers. If we manage to speak with a strong collective voice, we'll have the power to influence our legislators. But if we do not take this responsibility seriously, then I really fear that only an accident, indeed a catastrophe, will bring about change. And it should be obvious that storing 800 tons of nuclear waste in one highly populated area involves major risk. The chances of an accident may be low. And once all the spent fuel is in dry storage as of this November, the chances will be significantly lower. We won't have to worry about an explosion in the fuel pool, for example. However, the risks are still very real. Now my slide is not advancing. Oh. Next, Taylor, can you put the next slide on for me?
So I can't advance your slides, but if you click on that right arrow at the bottom, it should go to the next slide. Just click directly on that.
Nope, it's not doing anything. Nope.
Right there.
Yeah, it's not It's not doing anything.
What
Yeah.
about the arrow keys on your keyboard?
No, I tried them too.
Do you have the PowerPoint window open?
I do.
Click on the PowerPoint window if it's
The
not
PowerPoint.
open.
The PowerPoint window is what I'm looking at. I think it's the first slide.
Nope, but not in Zoom, in the actual PowerPoint application.
Oh, I'll have to escape out to get there. In fact, nothing is, my buttons are not working at all. This is my worst nightmare. I can talk at you, but I'd really much rather show my slides. What to do? Okay. Pause share. Shall I pause share?
Yep. Why don't I take over sharing?
Okay, if you would do that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
So go to the next slide.
Okay, just a moment. I unfortunately only have these in a PDF file, so we're gonna have to just scroll a little.
Okay. I can do this. I see it now. I can scroll. Okay, so the risk, even when spent fuel is in dry storage, the risk is very real. Pilgrim, holding 800 tons of irradiated spent fuel, is a risk to the health and welfare of several million residents, including everybody in the Boston area. For these reasons and others, but we'll focus on these: insecure storage site, aging thin-walled dry casks, insufficient monitoring. And what can we do about this? We deserve better. We need to demand better. So now I'm going to invoke somebody I never thought I would invoke. That's Dick Cheney. We have just observed the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which was a horrific act of terrorism. Now, a few days after that horrible day, Dick Cheney enunciated his 1% doctrine. If there's a 1% chance that Pakistani scientists are helping Al-Qaeda build or develop a nuclear weapon, we have to treat it as a certainty in terms of our response. It's not about our analysis, it's about our response. Now, as horrible a justification that was for invasion, or would be for any invasion, it's very interesting when you turn it on its ear. Let's apply this doctrine to Pilgrim. Here, I think it's a very appropriate doctrine. If there's a 1% chance that terrorists could breach the storage pad known as the ISFSI, the ISFSI, if there's a 1% chance that casks will leak, if there's a 1% chance that monitors don't detect a leak in a timely manner, then we have to treat this as a certainty in terms of our response. There's actually far more than a 1% chance that the casks will leak and that the monitors don't detect a leak in a timely manner. So those alone give us a much better chance than 1%, and we really need to take precautions. The terrorist chance may be remote, but it is calamitous if it happens. So we cannot allow that to happen. Now I want to go to another inspiration. The next slide. Michael Lewis wrote a wonderful book called The Fifth Risk, a chilling one. And he says about risk, there's another way to think about risk. Risk a society runs when it falls into the habit of responding to long-term risks with short-term solutions. Now, spent nuclear fuel is obviously a long-term risk. It lasts forever, the toxicity, more or less. Holtec dry casks are short-term solutions. They're warranted for 25 years. Next slide, please. So here we are in America's hometown. You see the beautiful replicated Pilgrim Village circa 1627. And looking down the road beyond the village, you see the beauty of Plymouth Bay. So when you leave Pilgrim or Plymouth Plantation, now known as Plymouth Patuxent, if you hang a right on Route 3A and then take a left about a mile down the road onto Rocky Hill Road and go another maybe 3/4 of a mile, you'll come to the edge of the Pilgrim campus, the nuclear Pilgrim campus. So next slide, please. Here it is. Holtec Pilgrim, now a nuclear waste dump. And if you can see, it's bounded on the east by the Plymouth Bay, and over here on the west, Rocky Hill Road. And here's the reactor building. It would look a little bit different this year because some of the buildings have been disassembled and there's a new storage pad up on the hill. We'll get to that in a moment. Next slide, please. Yes, let's take a little unauthorized tour of Pilgrim. Here's a typical sign welcoming you to Pilgrim. It says Pilgrim ISPC 2 project job site. ISPC 2. That means interim spent fuel storage installation number 2. Number 1 was built in 2014. Number 2 was finished this spring. And you'll notice all the evocations of safety. Safety starts here. Safety by choice. Well, the sign says so, and we're going to see if we think it is so. You'll also appreciate that ISPC is one of about 10,000 acronyms because the entire nuclear industry is in love with acronyms. Why say storage pad when you can say ISPC? Very good practice for those who lisp as well. Next slide, please. Now, we are taking a look at ISPC number 2 from across the meadow. Rocky Hill Road is right behind you, and you're maybe halfway into the meadow. From the Rocky Hill Road where you've parked, looking up to the storage, the ISPC pad with 12 casks there, it is about 362 feet. It's a little bit bigger than a football field, but not that far. Now we're going to follow this wall. It's a 4-foot wall. You could easily scramble over it. We're going to follow it to the left, and that will bring you to a much closer view of the ISPC pad. Here it is. This is the storage pad over here. These are the first 12 casks. They happen to be empty in this picture, but they're now filled, and there are more of them. So this is how close you are on this little illegal tour. And that's pretty damn close. Let's go on. Next slide, please. Now you'll notice they were surrounded by chain link fences. Well, chain link fences, what a protection. According to Dave Lochbaum, retired director of the Nuclear Safety Project of the Union of Concerned Scientists, chain link fences may protect postal carriers from fierce dogs, but they provide scant protection for dry casks from determined malevolent actors. The threat of terrorism is greater now than it was on 9/11. Remember January 6th of this year? And then remember all the other terrorist events that have happened this year and last year and the year before. Who might want to do damage to America's hometown? I wonder. Now, is there protection from guns, grenades, and bombs? It doesn't seem so. This is an armor penetrating weapon, and it's available on the internet. From Rocky Hill Road to the ISPC pad is about 362 feet. Firing range of the weapon, 2,296 feet. And as you can see, It's not that hard to get up close to the asphyxie pad. I haven't even mentioned grenades, bombs, planes, drones, decoys to deflect attention and then bring in guns, grenades, bombs. To date, there's no meaningful legislation that addresses the situation, but it is scary. It is what Dave Lochbaum and many other experts consider the biggest threat at Pilgrim, the threat of terrorism. Now, to protect the casks from terrorists, what we really need is hardened on-site storage, otherwise known as HOS. In Europe, dry casks, as Rosemary said, are typically much thicker, and they are typically out of sight, whether underground or inside a thick-walled, well-guarded building, or at least behind a berm, which is a dirt shield. A berm is dirt cheap, and certainly it would cost Holtec nothing to put one in, but it's not required by the NRC, and so they're not going to do anything that isn't required. Next slide, please. While you contemplate this situation, let's follow the wall in the other direction to the right. We had gone to the left, now we're going to the right. Go on to the next slide, please. And this heads, well, when you round this corner and go to the right, it will take you up to the upper parking lot. So next slide, please. Here's the upper parking lot. It's empty in this picture, but right next to it, you can see the chain link fence. That's the other side of the asphyxie pad over to the left. I couldn't show you the video because that was on my PowerPoint and this is just slides. So the little video would have showed you the trip up to this parking lot. Doesn't matter. Here's the reactor building and the spent fuel pool. No dogs in sight, no fierce dogs or any kind, and no guards in sight. Now go ahead to the next slide. Now imagine an asphyxie worker with a grudge. It so happens that a change of license granted to Holtec on August 5th of this year waives the necessity for non-security workers, such as those who will be dismantling the remaining buildings, to have background checks once all spent fuel is in dry storage. In other words, starting in late November. Is this certified insanity? No background checks for workers on the site? Next slide, please. Now, looking a little more closely at the dry casks, you can see the dimensions of them. They are ginormous, almost 20 feet high, 11 feet across, and they weigh 360,000 pounds. 180 tons, if you can imagine that. Imagine wrestling one of these babies up the hill from the lower storage pad, which you see here, to the upper storage pad where they're now being massed. These will all be removed from the lower storage pad, which was just 100 feet from the shore. Not sustainable, obviously, with rising seas, to the upper storage pad. So next slide, please. Now, the contents of a dry cask, you saw a picture like this from Rosemary, and just to linger a bit, the inner cylinder, the multi-purpose canister or MPC, holds potentially 68 fuel rod assemblies, each one consisting of a bundle of 4 fuel rods. And this inner pack, once it's been filled and once the empty space has been filled with helium, which is an inert gas to keep any oxygen from the fuel rods, that is put into an outer cask, the dry cask, and that too has a core of only 1/2 inch steel, but it's clad in 24 inches of concrete. The single dry cask, one of these, holds half as much, at least half as much cesium as was released at Chernobyl. Think about that. Now go on to the next slide, please. A nuclear meltdown releases massive radioactivity that was never supposed to reach our environment or our bodies. And though we no longer worry about a meltdown at Pilgrim, the same toxic isotopes are still sitting in dry casks and in the worst case scenarios can be released. Cesium and strontium play large parts in the impact on health, and both of these decay in a characteristic half-life of about 30 years, but that does not mean that they're gone in 60 years. It actually takes 10 to 20 half-lives for these to be close to gone from our environment. That's 300 to 600 years. We're only at the front end of these impacts. Now, for a walk down memory lane, you may remember 3 Mile Island, the partial meltdown. We are only 42 years beyond that, and that is about 1.4 half-lives of strontium-90. In other words, it's only 42 years, not 300 years. Church Rock, New Mexico, you may never have heard of. It happened 3 months after 3 Mile Island and was the most serious nuclear accident in the country, even though it didn't cross our radar screens, because it happened in Navajo lands. And what happened was an unlined pit of nuclear sludge. The dam broke and the sludge moved into the Puerco River, contaminating the river for all purposes. You probably heard of Chernobyl. That was in 1986 in the Ukraine, and we're only 1.1 half-life of the cesium-137 that was released there. In other words, very little of the 300 to 600 year life of that isotope. And then of course, Fukushima Daiichi, we're not very far from that, not even 1 half-life into it. Next slide, please. Cesium-137, if ingested or inhaled, can penetrate soft tissues, especially muscle, large doses leading to cancer and death. And per the National Academy of Science, there is no safe dose of ionizing radiation. The Chernobyl meltdown released 80,000 terabecquerels, that's one way to measure radiation, into the atmosphere. 35 years later, radiation has greatly decreased, but scientists estimate the zone around the former plant will not be habitable for up to 20,000 years. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah. Can these casks leak? Oh yes, they can and they will. Now, in the short term, probably not. But the outtake vents just below the welded lid are fitted with duct photon attenuators to diffuse the radiation that regularly streams through the overpacks. When the casks are new and undamaged, it's minimal and non-threatening within so-called allowable measures. However, all material things deteriorate. Concrete wears out, steel degrades, welds fail. And as you know already, the warranty, next slide, please. The warranty is for 25 years. How does that work? 25 years containing toxicity that lasts for eons. The license, by the way, is 40 years, and it's sure ultimately to corrode and likely to leak within 30 years, especially in a marine environment. Next slide, please. Can they be repaired? Well, according to the president of Holtec, no. It is not practical to repair a canister if it were damaged. You'll have millions of curies of radioactivity coming out of the canister. A canister that develops a microscopic crack, all it takes is a microscopic crack to get the release. To precisely locate it is a tall order. And then if you try to repair it remotely by welding, the problem with that is that you create a rough surface, which becomes a new site for corrosion down the road. I don't advocate repairing the canister, says Dr. Singh. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. What's his solution? The Russian doll solution. He suggests that the leaking cask could be capped with a larger cask. The larger overpack has not been authorized by the NRC. Even if authorized, it would not fit in the given space on the ISPAC once all the casks are there. And even if authorized, it would, even if it fit and were authorized, it would not work for technical reasons I can't go into. And the kicker is there are none available at Pilgrim anyway, so it's moot. Next slide, please. The NRC loves exemptions. It weakens existing standards in order to approve unsafe, thin-walled nuclear waste storage and transport containers for the US nuclear utility industry. This makes the industry very happy. Now, the Sandia Lab in 2019, it's under the DOE, did an assessment of extended storage and transport of spent nuclear fuel and reported that priority number one was the problem of the risks of short-term through-wall cracks in thin-walled canisters. But so far, the DOE, the NRC, and the US nuclear industry, none of them is seriously considering the only real solution, thick-walled casks that meet ASME N3 safety standards. Next, please. How will we know when a cask leaks? Now we get to the inspection plan. First, the NRC inspections. Right now, currently, they're happening every 2 years, not more than 3 years in any case. But from 2034, they will start happening every 5 years, give or take a year and a quarter per the aging management plan, 5 years from the expiry of cask warranty and 15 years before the expiry of cask license. Thereafter, inspections will happen every 5 years. This means that the inspections decrease as the casks grow older, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The NRC looks at the site programs, including radiation protection, corrective actions, and quality assurance, and looks at the physical condition of the casks, exterior only, and the pad, examines any site completed aging management reviews, and any required surveillance. The Holtec inspection is a daily visual inspection, quarterly instrumental soundings of heat emitted from the outer cask walls, some dosimeters placed around the site, and fuller inspection every 5 years. They propose to inspect one cask on site or alternatively take credit for an inspection done at a different site. Seriously? Next slide, please. The Mass Department of Public Health maintains 2 networks of monitors, 15 real-time monitors scattered around town, 14 in Plymouth, 1 in Duxbury, to detect brief increases above background radiation level. An increase triggers computer notification to MDPH and MEMA officials, but these are not on the Pilgrim site. They don't reveal which cask the leak is coming from. There are also thermoluminescent dosimeters, but that aggregates data only every quarter, and it's reported every quarter, which isn't very helpful in a crisis. Next slide, please. So what we actually need is data from every single dry cask in real time to be sent to the Department of Public Health and MEMA, and the state has the authority to demand this of Holtec. There is legislation proposing this. These are the bills we want you to support. S-1507, an act relative to monitoring dry casks of spent nuclear fuel, and H-2254, an act to add Section 5K of Chapter 3. It's really the same bill, it just has a less understandable title. This legislation was heard in the Joint Committee on Public Health this June, but it has not moved out of committee. Next, please. Tomorrow is the day we ask you to commit just 5 minutes to send a really important email to the members of the Joint Committee, because we need numbers. We need tons of people to do this. 1 person, 2 people, 3 people is not enough. We need a crowd. Ask them to vote the bill out of committee favorably, keep the issue in the public spotlight, and you will find the replica of the letter, or the sample of the letter we ask you to send. You'll find it in the toolkit, which is being put into the chat line If it isn't, I think it's there now. Next slide, please. If your legislator sits on the joint committee, please just quickly look at this list. And if you know that your legislator is here, then you have an advantage and you can email them or call them directly. It really could make a difference. Next, please. Here is the sample email. You don't have to cut, paste, and copy this version because you will find it in a toolkit. This just gives you a preview of what your email is going to look like. You'll put it in your own words to the extent that you can. Just do it tomorrow. You'll get an action alert through the league. Next, please. Alternatively, call your legislator. Some legislators love to be called, mine does, but yours may not. And if you happen to know that they do, take advantage of that fact. Next, please. At the federal level, and this is one step further if you have another 5 minutes and could go there. Did you know that included in the infrastructure bills are proposals to bail out aging nuclear plants and to fund the next generation of small modular reactors? And did you know that the National League of Women Voters has signed a letter along with over 200 other organizations opposing this bailout? You'll find a link to that letter also in our toolkit. I'm not sure if it's there now, but if it isn't, it'll be there tomorrow. Now, here are extra credit actions that you can take if you are inclined. There are currently 2 vacant seats out of 5 on the NRC committee. We really need commissioners who take safety seriously. So please urge President Biden to appoint commissioners who prioritize safety over industry interests. These appointments require Senate confirmation, and you can call the White House. The number is there. You can call Senator Markey and Senator Warren. They're both very, very solid and they care about these issues. It's good to let them know, because the more we communicate with our legislators, the better they understand where we're coming from and what matters to us. Please also, if you have time for one more phone call, ask the NRC to enact regulations to increase spent fuel safety. I can't see it on my slide. Taylor, maybe you can move the slide up, but there is a number there for the NRC if you are inspired. I can't see it, but I hope you can.
It's on the screen. You might just need to move the window up a little.
Okay.
It's right at the bottom.
Okay, great. And that's it. That's my pitch. If we do not communicate with our legislators in great numbers, they will not do anything much. And we really need them to work for us right now. We have nobody at our back. That's why we have to be our own best friends. And if we don't do it, nobody will. Now, I think that Rosemary is going to take questions if there are any.
Hi. We have some, all of the wonderful toolkits and everything are in the chat. And so far, I mean, I understand this is a very complicated issue. And also, Henrietta did such a great job explaining it that maybe that's why there are no questions. But I do want to read, there are 2 comments from Nancy James, who said that she had authored a widely circulated letter opposing residential development on a nuclear waste site in Concord, Massachusetts.
Where I grew up.
And circumstances of site title transfer track the story that we were just talking about, you know, transferring and stuff like that. And she also says that there was a full nuclear meltdown in the 1960s. By the way, I'm sure that there were lots of ones, like you were saying, Church Rock and all that. And she talks about in the mid-USA with deceased military and civilian casualties, best kept secret listed as a steam explosion.
Good heavens.
And
Mhm.
aren't they all?
Yeah.
Which, when it comes to nuclear power and you know the way they're built, you know, it would be a steam explosion of the worst. Um, so Lyle Lawrence says he doesn't see the info in the chat. I'm not sure why.
It's right here, actually. I see right above Lyle's comment, the link to the toolkit. So Lyle, look at the comment right above yours from Taylor Granga. She's included the link right there.
And also, you will be getting it tomorrow. So,
Yeah. Okay, good.
so this has been a wonderful chat, and it has been a wonderful opportunity for both Henrietta and I to share what we have been discovering for years of sitting through what was called the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizen Advisory Panel, called NDCAP. And we have been attending those meetings, NRC meetings, and have learned lots of information about what is actually happening. Unfortunately, we don't seem to have a lot of channels to get the information that we want, you know, to the NRC. The NRC seems to be closed-minded about anything that citizens have to say, by the very fact that they did the transfer, excuse me, from Entergy, you know, to Holtec International, which has also lots of LLCs. And the reason that they're LLCs is because if they have to go bankrupt, that's one of the easiest ways to do that. So I'm still looking to see if there are any other questions.
Rosemary?
Yes, Henrietta.
Yeah, there's one from Diane to us, from Diane Turco. How long is the waste to be stored in Plymouth? That is the $64,000 question, in fact. We don't know, but it's not going to leave anytime soon. As you know, I think Rosemary already mentioned that Yucca Mountain is no longer on the table as of 2012. And the other 9 sites that once upon a time were being considered by the Department of Energy have long since fallen off, and they don't seem to be investigating those anymore. Meanwhile, there are all kinds of plans for privately operated consolidated interim storage facilities, one of which is Holtec's plan, and another of which is from 2 other companies. They want to put consolidated interim storage in Texas. It is technically right now illegal because the NRC theoretically doesn't allow interim storage until there's a permanent storage, and there isn't. Unfortunately, the West Texas interim storage facility was just authorized today, but there will be court cases because a lot of people are opposed to it, including many, many, many Texans. The New Mexico interim storage facility proposed by Holtec is quite horrifying. It's located near the Permian oil fields and is mostly populated by Navajo and Diné people. Once again, they've already been subjected to uranium mining accidents and uranium tailing, and it's not a very nice prospect. But even more so, even if it were an empty land, the prospect of having 500 or 1,000 dry cask storages just sitting out in the open air like bowling pins to be knocked over by somebody with a plane or a bomb is not a great idea.
I see a question from Dan Borelli. Why do you think that the general population doesn't perceive nuclear as a threat in its entire extractive production to the waste? And one of the things that you said is that radioactivity is tasteless, odorless, and you don't really know that you're being your soft tissues and everything else are being damaged when that there is a radioactive release. Do you have a comment on that, beyond that, Henrietta? That why the population
yes.
doesn't perceive it as a threat?
I think there are many reasons, but primarily it's an invisible threat. It's not like climate change. It doesn't crash into your yard and alert you with a flood or a fire or any other kind of, or a torrential rain. Those things we can see and feel and we are experiencing. That's why climate change is finally gotten the attention of the American public and the whole world. We see it, we feel it, we experience it, but radiation, nothing. It's invisible, and not only that, it's terrifying, and people do not want to look horror in the face. It's a natural human instinct not to think about the scariest, the hardest to visualize, the horror of it. And of course, nuclear waste sites, rather nuclear power plants, tend to be tucked discreetly out of sight, where they're not, you don't pass them every day. And that's true of Pilgrim, and it's true of most of the others as well. You don't pass them every day, so you out of sight, out of mind. That's my thought anyway. It's a good question.
This is from Diane. Does the federal regulator, the NRC, follow their mandate to protect the public and the environment?
That sounds like a rhetorical question.
Yes, because that's not what they do. I also believe in if anybody, I see that Nancy James wants to send me her letter, and I'd be happy to have it. I think we're in the toolkit tomorrow. You'll be getting our emails so that you can follow through with either Henrietta or I on any of these issues or any information that you have. We really appreciate it. I have another question that says, and I don't think you should necessarily answer this question, Henrietta, because I don't want you to get in trouble. But it said, how did you get the pictures from the illegal tour?
Ah, well, they came from a cell phone that I am privy to.
And you're not going to give your sources. See,
No,
a good reporter never gives her sources.
Absolutely not. Why would I do that? No, but I have access to those photos, and many other people do too. You do too now. You all have access to those photos. So.
One more, because I think we're getting past. Do you think there's room in future conversations to adopt nuclear energy more into our energy production systems in safer and smaller iterations than the molten salt reactors for cleaner energy production, especially when we're talking about climate crisis? Nuclear energy is a carbon-free energy source. Could you comment on this?
Oh. Would you like to comment?
I know Bill Gates is looking into this, but my thing is that all of this is so complex, all of, nuclear power and all that they're doing, though we do have to do something with the waste. But we have been drug along since the 1940s because of Atoms for Peace and our guilt of creating the bomb and everything else, that we keep throwing money at this very expensive energy source when we should be putting it into solar energy, wind energy, conservation, and everything else. The other thing I ask, and I don't get this, and nobody's really talked to me about this, nuclear power produces lots of heat, and this heat goes into the ocean. And this, they have to keep everything cooled. It would seem to me this isn't carbon free. This is, it's quote unquote carbon free, but it's still heating. If somebody's got some information on that.
Yeah, I would also add that it's only carbon free if you don't consider the whole process. The process starts with uranium mining, which is hardly green, and then processing of uranium, again, not green, transporting the uranium all over the country in trucks and trains, not green. It is also incredibly expensive to build a nuclear reactor of any kind is so expensive that it's off-putting, and it will, anything built started now will not be online for many, many years. It is not a solution to our climate crisis for that reason alone.
I think, thank you, everybody. These have been great questions, and but it is 8 o'clock, and I think this is when we need to stop.
Yeah. That's
Okay.
it.
Thank you, everybody, for being there. Please follow up with the toolkits
Yes.
and the action alert tomorrow, and we'll take a look at these questions. And if I need to, I'll get back to you on this. Yeah, killing the marine life, around the plant,
Yes.
the
yes.
heat and everything's been terrible. Okay. Love you
Thank
all.
you.
Bye.